The arrow that Gu Kaishin had launched reached the city and began to descend towards the headquarters of the Night Watch. The arrow contained a secret message for Uncle Jai Gang. Gu Kaishin revealed to him that Jiang Chen was hiding a major calamity. As his master, he would take him to a forbidden area to hide temporarily. Jai Gang should try to find allies from the Sealed Kings while he was away, since when he returned, he feared there would be a fierce battle. Upon reading the message, Jai Gang could not help but be shocked and become alert at the same time, as he did not know what was happening. A few hours later he met with Jane Tang, sat on the sofa, bowed his head, put his fist on his forehead, closed his eyes, and remembered that Jiang had killed a member of the Huang family, that cut off Xiao Bihan's arm, and now carried with him a calamity. He feared this was going to be a difficult challenge. Jane Tang sat next to him, and she tried to comfort him by saying that no challenge was easy. But they were going to overcome all challenges, since he had decided to protect Jiang Chen, no matter what happened. She advised him that it was better to focus on the path ahead and stop worrying about the past, adding that she had spoken with her father, who was willing to support them. She began to imagine her father, Duan Hongyao, and Gu Kaishin. Now they had the Celestial Sword King, Jai Gang's elder sister, her father, and Commander Duan. With 4 sealed king powers, they were going to be able to handle any storm that came their way. Jai Gang stood up, started walking towards the door, and thought she was right. His elder sister had already gone to meet the master. Now he decided to visit the sealed king of the Mu family and merchant Luo family. Even if he had to lie, he was willing to fight for more allies for Jiang. Jane Tang began observing him, and she remained silent. He turned his head back, started looking at her with a serious gaze, and decided that if things went from bad to worse, he would use the same energy he had when he burst into Zhuoyao family and give it his all. Upon hearing this, Jane Tang, who had a cheerful look, began to smile, since it had been years since she last saw Jai Gang so excited. Several hours later, day broke and Gu Kaishin's sword grew huge and positioned itself under the island. He began to use his power, and they started heading towards the Forbidden Zone. He asked Hong Yao what she thought they should do after returning. Hong Yao, who was chewing gum, blew a bubble and with a calm look thought that Jiang's 9 miasma wings were cool. She wished she could raise one herself. Gu Kaishin quickly moved his finger back and launched a small arrow which destroyed Hong Yao's bubble gum bubble. He slightly turned his head towards her, and with a serious look called her silly girl, and asked if she could be serious for once. Hong Yao began to look at him with a tender gaze and explained that Gran Shi had no tolerance whatsoever towards calamities. If even he couldn't solve it, she would be even less able to do so. After saying this, she asked him if he could take down a great Jianguo general in one blow. Gu Kaishin became enraged and gave her a soft blow on the head, asking her to watch her tone. She closed her eyes, began to touch her head, and started screaming in pain. He closed his eyes and began to imagine his disciples. He had a lot of reputation, yet he ended up taking in a group of strange disciples like them. He began to imagine Hong Yao raising her spear. She was always noisy and rowdy. She never cared about anything. According to him, Jai Gang was a stubborn and obstinate person who had a one-track mind. Zhang Quan had divine talent, but still insisted on playing with the forbidden. A small bump appeared on Hong Yao's head. She approached him and with a smile asked why he was so determined to protect Jiang Quan. He turned his back on her, opened his eyes, and while observing the landscape, he asked her if she really wanted to know the reason. Then, he raised his head, began to look towards the sky, and explained to her that when he had taken her as a disciple, it had only been because she was wearing red armor, and he thought it looked cheerful. As for taking Ji Gang, it had been even more random. He had mistaken Gu Kaishin for a regular client outside of a club. At that time, when the heir of the Zhao family tried to forcefully marry Tang Jin, Jia Gang went to stop him, and Gu Kaishin was willing to give his life to protect him. The men from the Zhao family pounced on Gu Kaishin, and the battle began. Jia Gang took advantage of the commotion, grabbed Tang Jin in his arms, and fled. Not everything needed a reason. He was doing this because he cared about Zhang. He began to look down with a sad gaze, since now Zhang Quan was the same. At the moment he had met him, he had known that they were going to get along well. So he simply had accepted Jia Gang's wishes. If Zhang was his disciple, then there was no reason not to protect him. Hong Yao approached him and thought that he was the best master in the world. He acted tough, but in reality he was very protective. He asked to stop flattering him. According to her, there was only one way to truly protect Zhang Chen. She rested her head on his shoulder, closed her eyes, and with a pleasant smile mentioned the supreme military commander of the Great Xia, one of the 3 invincible supremes. Gu Kaishan began to look at her with a calm gaze and remained silent. She opened her eyes, started to caress his shoulder with her finger, and revealed to him that the only way to protect Zhang was with the help of Zhang Wushuang's grandfather, the martial god Zhang Shumenji. At the same time, in Paju Cave, a battlefield of countless races, someone clenched their fists tightly and began to quickly bring it down towards the ground. Several men began to approach a man wearing a red cape, but at that moment he struck the ground hard, breaking it into pieces and creating a large shockwave, which began to expand everywhere, repelling the men. The shockwave was so powerful that the men lost consciousness and began to fall to the ground. The man wearing the red cape was the invincible martial god named Zhang Shumenji. While his body was surrounded by powerful energy, he clenched his fist tightly, stood up, started walking around the area, and seeing that countless races had dared to invade Great Xia, he decided to kill them all mercilessly. His blow was so powerful that it created a large hole in the cave floor. Standing in front of him were several more men. He began to walk towards them and concluded that after this battle, the countless races should calm down for a while. He gave the order to the men to guard the entrance of the cavern. They addressed him as martial god and responded with an understood master. At that moment, someone with energy similar to Zhang Wushuang started contacting him, leaving him somewhat confused since he did not know why he was being contacted now when Wushuang was supposed to be at the Tanjiao camp. But to his surprise, Gu Kaishan began appearing in front of him, addressed him as martial god, and told him it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Shumenji began to stare at him, and couldn't help but clench his teeth tightly and go on alert, seeing that the Celestial Sword King had contacted him through Wushuang. He thought he had encountered problems in the camp, so he asked Gu Kaishan to speak clearly. He reached out his hand towards the sky and with a calm look replied not entirely, adding that he was doing very well. He wanted to make a deal with him. He began to imagine Zhang Cheng surrounded by the poisonous mist of Little Nine and revealed to him that he had taken a new disciple named Zhang Chen, who had a divine-level creation class but possessed the calamity called 9 miasma wings. He wanted him to protect his life. Sumenji began to stare at him, and upon hearing that Jing possessed the ancient calamity 9 miasma wings, he could not help but go into shock. According to him, Gu Kaishan must be joking since Great Shai had always believed it was better to kill than let any calamity go free, asking him if he believed the martial god was omnipotent. Gu Kaishan remained calm and with a puzzled look asked him if this was true. In response, Shumenji asked him to name his terms. While his eyes were shining, he began to look at him and asked if he had heard of the Tiaxa Hall in Yanmeng Marsh, adding that only he knew the way to all Grand Shai. He could take Zhang Wushuang and give him something fortuitous. Sumenji's eyes also began to shine and he started imagining the Tiaxa Hall, the legendary treasure of celestial Dao. If Wushuang could go there, his cultivation would advance a lot. He reached out to one side and his cape began to float. He could accept Gu Kaishan's conditions, but with one condition. Zhang Chen was not allowed to use 9 miasma wings during the Prodigy tournament. And if he couldn't obtain first place in the overall ranking of Great Sea's prodigies, he himself would throw him into the battlefield of myriad races for him to defend. Gu Kaishan turned his head back, and with an indecisive look began to think about it. Shumenji turned his back on him, and as he was walking away, started looking at the ground and explained that if he really wanted to save Zhang's life, then he had no other choice. Gu Kaishan began to look down and with a desperate look agreed, since sending Zhang to the battlefield was still better than being killed by General Zhao and the others when they returned. Shumenji began to walk, and while he was looking at the ground, he remembered that the 9 miasma wings was an ancient exotic species. According to him, it was impossible for her to reach a natural calamity scale in this era. Moreover, this generation of Great Shi had produced 3 other divine talents, and Jiang was only the fourth and he was just in the creation type. He knew that without using the Calamity, Jiang would not be able to pass Wuxuang's test, let alone be able to finish first. He clenched his fist, and while his cape was flying, with a determined look, he thought that even if by some miracle Jiang managed to cause some trouble, as a martial god, he could eliminate any evil spirit from the world in seconds. At the same time, the island reached up to the Forbidden Zone, which was a place full of portals. Jiang began to observe the place, and with a surprised look realized that they had already officially entered the Yanm swamp. He asked the others if they remembered the way to get here. Mu Henkyu was dumbfounded and explained to him that remembering the path in these constantly changing dimensional fragments was impossible. The Celestial Sword King had relied on aura to guide the way. It was said that Yunmeng Swamp had 10 levels, with the 10th and 9th being relatively safer. The deeper they went, the easier it would be to get lost. Her grandfather had gotten lost at the 7th level years ago. Jiang sat on the ground, joined his hands, and prepared to meditate a bit. He felt that he was already lost. Now that the path could not be remembered with eyes and brain, he decided to sit down and meditate, letting the spiritual sense guide them. Mu Henkyu and Luo Sandao also sat down, joined their hands, and they too prepared to meditate. Jiang entered his mind where the tree of all things was located. For now there was no wind in his mind. However, the tree was moving towards something, and he did not know if it could be marking the way. He closed his eyes and concluded that there was something ahead that the tree was desperately longing for. Looking a little more closely, he saw that a rose-shaped fruit had grown on the tree. At that moment, an information window appeared. He had obtained a red functional fruit, which was a skill copy card. After using it, he could randomly copy one of the target's abilities and merge it with himself. The copied ability had no class restrictions. There was a possibility that the copied ability could be improved or worsened during the process, and last but not least, he must complete the copy within 3 hours or the card would expire. He began to observe the system window with a perplexed look, and could not help but be shocked to see that this card allowed him to copy abilities, and also it had no restrictions. In the Tanjiao camp, everyone was top-notch prodigy, so he could choose anyone he wanted. The most valuable targets were going to be Zhang Wuxiang, Bai Fang, and Tang Ying. He closed his eyes again, and decided that he couldn't do this since the ability to copy was random, and he could end up with a useless ability. According to him, it was difficult to choose. He only had 3 hours to copy the ability, so he didn't know if it was simply better to take the risk. While he was distracted deep in thought, Gu Kaishan drew everyone's attention. He put his foot on the rock and revealed to everyone that they had arrived at the 6th layer of Yunmeng Swamp, called Takesu Realm. Ahead was Takasu Hall, the place he was taking them to, asking everyone to get ready. Jiang came out of his thoughts, began to look at Gu Kaishan, and decided to test the copy card with the master. He couldn't help but start smiling since he remembered that Gu Kaishan always said that he knew a move, and had even said that he wanted to take him as a disciple. So he simply decided to copy the move and consider it as an early lesson. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,